Acts chapter 7, part 2. Okay, we're not very far into this actually. Talking about the patriarchs. Jacob had 12 patriarchs. So we haven't gotten past that. Verse 9 technically. So because the patriarchs were jealous of Joseph, they sold him as a slave into Egypt. That's the Technicolor Dreamcoat story. And Egypt is far from there. Like that was a thing. Like it's out of Canaan, right? You said the promised land is Canaan.
It's outside of Canaan. I think like 300 to 500 miles, something like that.
Okay. Something that was confusing though is that I thought Abraham's descendants up until now were slaves already.
No.
So they sold it. Like, then what is like God saying they're going to be mistreated and enslaved?
He's talking about when they went to Egypt.
Oh.
That's what that's referencing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So God promises that, but it doesn't, that wasn't like an immediate thing of all of Abraham. Because Ishmael and Isaac existed outside of that enslavement.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Outside of that, not slavery.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So then Joseph is the one that's sold into slavery.
Yeah.
God was with him, rescued him from his troubles through the wisdom that he gave Joseph, which gained him goodwill from the Pharaoh of Egypt. Mm-hmm. So the Pharaoh made him the ruler over all his land, or all his palace. Famine struck all of Egypt and Canaan. So this is like the misfortune of Abraham's people starting. Enslavement by...
Getting put in bondage.
And then... But it's just Joseph that's in bondage at this point.
No, it's all the nation of Israel. Wait a minute.
We're not there yet.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The brothers sold him off to slavery,
but
no one's enslaved yet.
Right.
Okay.
And then there was a famine.
And there's a famine. And Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt, so he sent our forefathers on their visit, which means the
12 patriarchs.
The patriarchs. That's what I was trying to think of. Okay, and they didn't recognize Joseph, and they went again, and Joseph told them, "It's me."
Yeah.
I don't really get that.
This is a prophecy and a fulfillment of Jesus coming to his own.
Oh.
And them not recognizing him, them not knowing he's the Messiah. That's a picture of that. Joseph was sold by them into Egypt, and they came into because they were starving and wanted food, and he was put in over all the food.
Wow.
And they saw him, and they didn't know who he was.
I was going to ask later because we eventually get to Moses, and that story obviously seems like a picture of Jesus where he
definitely
in some way. Okay.
All of these Old Testament things speak to Jesus.
Yeah. I didn't realize Joseph.
Yeah.
That makes sense too because he was a slave and then became a king of whatever, or Pharaoh's chosen. Yeah. Okay. So he had to tell them, and then Pharaoh learned about Joseph's family. Mm-hmm. After this, sorry, I'm kind of reading it, but after this, Joseph sent for his father Jacob and his whole family. And Jacob went down to Egypt where he and his ancestors died.
That's how they all got in from the promised land that they were in into Egypt.
So Pharaoh then learned about Joseph's family. When Joseph told Jacob that it was him, then Pharaoh learned about Joseph's family.
Yeah.
And so Joseph brought his family over to Egypt.
Yeah.
Then Jacob went down to Egypt where he and our ancestors died.
They were traveling from the promised land into Egypt to get grain. He sent his 12 sons to do it. Finally, Joseph revealed himself who he was, and that's when Pharaoh learned of the story. And so Pharaoh said, "Bring your father and your family. Let them stay here."
Oh.
So they came there because there was food there.
Okay, and that's where they died.
And that's where they died, and that's how they got put into bondage.
In Egypt. Okay. Okay. Well, he doesn't talk about that.
Okay.
Maybe. Their bodies were brought to Shechem, placed in the tomb Abraham had bought from the sons of Hamor and Shechem for a certain sum of money. Oh, that means they're enslaved. He bought them for a certain sum of money. Is that right?
Wait, no.
Right. Their bodies were brought back and placed in the tomb.
Okay. Abraham Isaac Jacob bought tombs and land in the promised land. So what he's saying is their bodies were brought out. They died in Egypt, but they were brought out and they were relayed to rest in the promised land.
Okay. Okay, catching up with myself. As the time drew near for God to fulfill his promise to Abraham,
That he would bring his nation out.
Right. So the promise that the slave owners will worship, or the slaves will worship God in the end. That's the promise. Okay. A new king to whom Joseph meant nothing came to power in Egypt. He dealt treacherously with our people, oppressed the ancestors, threw out newborn babies, and at that time was when Moses was born. Yeah. So is that the new king who then put Joseph in slavery? Because I don't think it talks about them being enslaved. It talks about Moses from now on. Yeah.
It was a new Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph, who didn't understand all that had happened with Joseph and his brothers and Pharaoh. And he just saw the Jews as being a threat because they were so great a number.
Okay.
And he's like, they could take us over right now.
Okay.
So let's put them in slavery.
Okay. And that's why they forced the newborns to be thrown out? Or
yeah, because the Pharaoh started getting worried about how big they were getting.
Okay.
So he instructed the midwives, the people who help the women bear children, to drown the males, to kill the males, and because that would decrease their number, but it didn't work.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the nation just grew bigger and bigger and bigger.
You'd think they would decrease the females. Am I crazy?
I don't know.
Because men can inseminate more women. Okay.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of guys and less women.
But if you don't have any guys, how are you going to get pregnant?
Well, but
I have no answer for that.
Doesn't seem right to me. Okay.
So this brings in
now Moses was born.
Moses, which means from the water.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because he was put in a basket.
That's right.
I remember that. And he was no ordinary child.
That's right. He was the handsome baby.
I remember these teachings from you. Yeah. When he was placed outside, for 3 months he was cared for by his family, placed outside, and Pharaoh's daughter took him and brought him in as his son. And then at 40 years old, he went back to visit his own people, the Israelites. So Moses, I wanted to be clear here that Moses is an Israelite.
He's a Jew, right?
But he was raised by Egyptians.
That's right.
Okay.
40 years in Pharaoh's house.
Wow. And was it known that he was a Jew?
I think it was known he came from them because Pharaoh's daughter mentions he's a Hebrew.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it wasn't this
secret
idea that he was actually Egyptian this whole time, but okay. So then Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, and they didn't. I'm kind of skipping over things now. He tried to reconcile an argument, and they questioned him. So I was wondering, Moses knew that he was called to do that.
Yeah, he knew it.
From early on?
Yeah, it seems like it because the text indicates he knew. But he didn't know how. And so, which is a prototypical story in Scripture. What Moses did is he left Pharaoh's house and he saw an Egyptian beating one of his brothers. So he murdered him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he buried him in the sand. Well, the next day, 2 nation of Israel, brothers of his, were having an argument, and he tried to step in, and they said, what are you going to do, kill us? So that's what caused him to flee 40 more years in the wilderness.
Because he was scared of punishment for killing the guy?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, because he killed an Egyptian.
Oh, I didn't.
He said,
it talks about this.
The news got out.
when he heard this, he fled, where he
Yeah.
settled. I didn't realize it was out of fear.
Yeah.
Okay. Where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons.
Yeah.
Do we
Eliezer and Gershom.
Oh, Eliezer
Eliezer.
and Gershom. After 40 years had passed, the angel appeared to Moses in the flames of a burning bush in the desert near Mount Sinai. And so, sorry. When he saw this, he was amazed at the sight, and as he went over to get a closer look, he heard the Lord say, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Moses trembled with fear and did not dare look. And then he's given some instructions, but this is like when it all comes full circle.
Starts
I would imagine.
to.
Like
it's being introduced at this point.
Okay. So God, I'm trying to think though. Moses it's Jacob, it's Isaac, it's Joseph, and then it's like 4 generations later.
Yeah,
Or is it
except
longer?
between Joseph and Moses was a long time.
Between Joseph and, oh, okay.
Long time. Long, many year.
So Joseph and, was Joseph alive because it was during the same king, like the king transition was in Joseph's time.
No, it was after Joseph died that the new pharaoh, new king came in.
Oh, but didn't you say that king was the one that introduced slavery?
Yeah.
So it wasn't to Joseph directly that
No.
he introduced, it was to later
To his people that grew so big
Okay.
after they brought them into Egypt.
Okay. And Moses was on it. You don't know how long that was? Like a while?
I'm going to cite hundreds.
Okay. All right. So it was like, so Moses knew of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and what God told Abraham and Isaac because of some writing that was, or like oral tradition passed that down.
Moses is the one who wrote what's called the Pentateuch. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Oh my gosh.
So he didn't have any written record. But the thing that's important to know about the Israel in that day is oral traditions were everything. And that's why I say the way they say a word meant more than what was written. You see, so that's how their traditions stayed pure, is they knew the inflections of the language were saying one thing and not another. When the 12 patriarchs went into bondage, they had been in there so long that by the time Moses comes to lead them out, they had probably all but almost lost the idea of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and what the promise. They might have known it. He had to reintroduce to them. So God comes to Moses and says, that's who I am, and I'm here for you to lead them out and retrain them to be my people. Because while they were in bondage, they started to embrace all the things that the Egyptians did, false gods, little idols and things. Yeah, so they had to be cleaned from all that.
That's sort of how I imagined Moses was a picture for Jesus, is they had all these, A, he knew who he was, B, he tried to tell them and they didn't hear it, and C, they all had like these idols and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Sorry, but Moses trembled with fear and did not dare to look.
Yeah. And so what it says is, it's in chapter 20 of Exodus, but I don't know. Does he continue to talk about Moses after this?
Yeah.
Might as well cover that, and then I'll get to that, what he means by that.
This is the same Moses they have rejected with words. Who made you ruler and judge? He was sent to their ruler. He was sent to be their ruler and delivered by God himself through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He led them out of Egypt, performed wonders and signs in Egypt and at the Red Sea for 40 years in the wilderness. I'm reading this whole thing right now, but
okay, so that's what Moses did. So let me go back. Moses is up wandering around with his sheep 40 years in the wilderness after running away from Pharaoh. And he sees a bush that's burning up in what they call the Mount of God. He goes up there and God speaks to him. And God says, I am this, I am that. And so Moses has his first interaction And Moses constantly checks God. God says, I want you to do that. How can I do that? I can't. He's always telling him I can't do it. God says, go and do it. And he tells him how to do it. And he tells him to take his staff and go and show these miracles to Pharaoh and the nation of Israel who are in bondage and in Egypt. So he goes back to do it. When, after giving 10 plagues upon Egypt, starting off small and growing in ferocity, the last plague, kill the firstborn, allowed Moses, Pharaoh said, take him, get out of here. So it allows him to go. And they go through the wilderness and they have a bunch of experiences that they doubt every time. They get thirsty, they doubt, they murmur, they want to go back, all this stuff. They finally get to the mount where Moses is going to go up in front of the nation and he's going to meet with Yahweh in a cloud. There's thunder and lightning and the mountain shook. And God said, tell them not to touch the mountain or they'll die. That's what it's talking about. He exceedingly feared. Now, some people think he's talking about when he first saw the burning bush. It could be that too. But the writer of Hebrews in chapter 12 tells us that almost the exact words, that it was when the nation was there watching. Yeah. So Stephen doesn't go chronologically here. He jumps around a bit in the history with the different things. So it's not easy to follow, in order. So he's told the story of Moses leading the nation out. Where does he go from there?
Well, I just wanted to see what you meant, though. After 40 years had passed, an angel appeared. Yeah. So he says that. I see. And then Stephen will say, this is the same Moses they rejected with words, which is how it kind of jumps back.
Okay.
Okay. This is the Moses who told the Israelites, God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your own people. He was in the assembly in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him on the Mount Sinai.
Okay. And Moses wrote, when he recorded the first 5 books, he wrote that God would raise up a prophet like unto him. That is a prophetic utterance of the Messiah. That's just, he's going to be like, he's going to lead you. He's going to be for you people. And it was an ancient writing, right? Joseph Smith said it's talking about him.
Oh my gosh.
He put that in the footnotes of his translated Bible.
Do Mormons know that?
Yeah. Yeah. If they went to seminary.
What do they think of Jesus? So insane. I was just about to ask if Muslims think that's Muhammad, because
I don't know.
that could be where they acknowledge Moses.
Could be.
Is that he says there's a prophet coming.
Yeah, and if they thought it's Muhammad, then yeah.
Yeah. Wow. But our ancestors refused to obey him, and so they rejected him, and in the hearts turned back to Egypt.
Yeah, they had Egypt in their hearts. Every time a problem, let's go back. They just were very weak.
Okay. So just to zoom out again. So Abraham gets the curse, or gets the knowledge that his people are going to be enslaved for a long time, and that God will save them.
Yeah.
So the enslavement was through the king that was during when Moses was born.
Yeah.
Who technically he was raised by the daughter of that king.
Yeah, there's the irony of it. Is that the one who would free the nation from bondage was living in under their roof.
And the person that enslaved them. Okay,
Yeah.
so these people were enslaved, and then it took those plagues for them to be released freed, which meant Moses could lead them somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what freed meant.
Yeah. Well, freed actually meant, if memory serves, Pharaoh at the time said, you can go 3 days and worship. That's what it meant, because that's what they kept saying. Let us go 3 days away, journey, and worship in our own land. And he wouldn't let them do it for fear that they would take off. So there's the possibility that when he let them go, he was saying, you can go for 3 days. They took off.
Oh, okay. But they were really scared that whole time. That's what you're saying. They kept
Yeah,
wanting
they
to
were
turn
fearful
back.
of everything that fell upon them. They were afraid of.
Okay. And sorry, I'm getting this confused, but they acknowledge Moses's, like, for lack of a better word, divinity or whatever. Like, what is the word for a prophet?
Inspiration.
Like
His call.
inspiration.
Yeah.
These people that are following him recognize that.
Yeah. But they turn on him all the time.
Okay. But it was people back in Egypt who didn't. The people that were questioning him when he's telling people, I'm going to save us. And people are like, what are you going to do? Kill it? Like,
well, that was 40 years before
that.
Yeah. So, yeah, they didn't initially, when he was operating by his flesh,
okay.
I'm going to lead you. Look, they didn't agree.
But
right?
it's those same people that eventually
It's
came
40
around.
years later.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the same community of people. Yeah.
Community. Okay.
And they're all the sons of Jacob, all the offspring of the 12 sons of Jacob.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not Ishmael.
No. Ishmael ran off somewhere else. That's a nation developing somewhere else.
Okay. But wait. God said that he would enslave and save all of Abraham's descendants. So that would also mean Ishmael's. It's not just through Jacob.
It's just through Jacob because there's a promised line that comes Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and 12 sons. That's the promised line. If you're outside of that, you're still loved, but you're not part of that lineage. So when he made the promise to take them and save them out of bondage, he was talking about Isaac, Jacob, and Jacob's 12 sons.
Oh,
That's specific.
Okay.
And
we talked about, I thought in the last episode we said it was through also Ishmael's. Like that's where the whole...
Well, it's also through Ishmael that Islam comes in and that God loves those people and he cares for them. But all we're looking at is God choosing, selecting, and working through a narrow line that would ultimately bring his Messiah.
Okay.
That was not going to come through Abraham's son Ishmael.
Okay.
It was always and only going to come through Jacob.
Okay.
Okay.
You were going to say something else, I think.
I can't remember.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does.
So from this point forward, we are going to be learning about this line. That line.
Okay.
All that happened with the other sons and the wives and all. Now we are talking about God's covenant people that Moses leads up to the mountain and receives the law.
Okay. Okay, he was in the assembly of the wilderness. The angel spoke to him. He received the living word to pass on to us. But our ancestors, Stephen talking to Sanhedrin, saying, but our ancestors refused to obey him. Instead, they rejected him and in their hearts turned back to Egypt.
Now, that line cannot be overstated. That God elected them, God led them out by miracles, Moses gave them the law, and they constantly went after other gods. They did not follow him. Their hearts yearned after Egypt. It yearned after everything but him. Yeah.
Okay.
So what Stephen's doing is he's calling them out because they trusted in their heritage to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12. And he's like, you guys our fathers came out of Egypt and they didn't even follow God. That's what he's saying. He's starting to turn the heat up on all their pride for their heritage, their genealogy, sons of Abraham.
Okay. I'm going to end the episode there. One more part for
chapter
7.